You're fortunate to be early, at least early enough, because XRP is poised to completely destroy Bitcoin in terms of performance. Indeed, we are approaching the latter phases of this market cycle, but that is where the true magic takes place. And let me just say this, if XRP returns to its peak, my God, the implications for XRP in terms of US dollars would be enormous. It would definitely be face-melting season. Additionally, you will get another perspective on why it isn't abnormal for analysts to advocate for entering double-digit price action during this market cycle. Folks, it truly isn't. Regarding being early, however, that relies on a few different perspectives. In terms of the cycle, how early are you? More relevant, though, is how early in the crypto adoption process are you? Think about this. The market for real estate is worth $380 trillion. Bonds? The market for bonds is worth $117 trillion. What about global stock markets? $115 trillion roughly. Well, what about cryptocurrency? Well, LiveCoin Watch has the answers right here on your screen. As of right now, cryptocurrency is only worth $3.8 trillion. What is this class of ant assets? This is so incredibly great that you might as well round down to zero at so little. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. In my opinion, it most definitely is, because it's so clear that cryptocurrency is here to stay and that XRP is an early and unambiguous victor in the crypto space. However, I can assure you that when you return to this screen in the future, the market capitalization will have risen to above $100 trillion, as it ought to be. Simply put, adoption hasn't been sufficient. Congratulations then. Yes, you're still early in that regard if you're listening to this in 2025. Check out this post by Credible Crypto, a chart analyst. I mentioned this in my most recent video, but since it's relevant, it's worth briefly restating. I want to focus on one main point to show why it is not at all insane to think that XRP will reach astronomical levels during the current market cycle. This is what Credible Crypto stated. Keep in mind that he is speaking of the near future. However, he noted here that we've swept the lows that I was looking for a sweep on the XRP BTC pairing as of last night. However, because Bitcoin fell below the $114,000 to $116,000 zone, I was unable to execute my lower timeframe scalp on XRP USD. Although we still believe that this scenario would probably come to pass, Bitcoin has to gain some traction on shorter timescales. I believe that XRP is poised for a pleasant upward bounce if Bitcoin can find a floor shortly. According to Credible Crypto, one of the top analysts in the whole cryptocurrency market, there is a very real possibility that XRP will outperform Bitcoin shortly. Please note that this graphic only shows what it looked like about the middle of June this year.
Therefore, it would be pleasant to witness that. However, what about the overall picture? How has XRP performed in comparison to Bitcoin? Oh, you know, more than 10 years if you return? It turns out that if you were unfamiliar with this chart, you would remark, oh, it doesn't look like XRP is doing that well against Bitcoin, which would imply that XRP is awful. It's the conclusion that those who have no idea what they're talking about reach. Because this XRP BTC chart is visible to you, if you go back a year, the XRP USD chart looked something like this. Additionally, as I previously mentioned, markets find bottoms on the XRP USD chart at that time. Therefore, XRP was worth whatever it was, say 50 cents. And I replied, guys, I understand that the toxic Bitcoin maximists, they're making fun of us XRP holders. However, if you go back in time, you can see that XRP eventually did tear during the most recent cycle, as well as the one before it, when its price was at an all-time low in comparison to the Dow. I'm telling you people, and that's why you need to realize that we're not finished. The same is true of Bitcoin. In case this doesn't make sense, allow me to simplify it. This market cycle has already seen several instances where XRP has soared to a new all-time high. That has already taken place. We reached our peak just last month. Or was it actually early August? Whatever it was in recent weeks, whether it was officially July or early August, it all seems to have blended together. At $3.65, XRP reached a new all-time high. You enjoy seeing it then. It is quite amazing to witness that. On the XRP BTC pair, however, we haven't yet done that. And my God, look at how much Bitcoin is worth now. Here is a look back at the time when XRP and Bitcoin reached their highest point ever in 2017. By the way, it's been that long. So consider that. It took nearly 7 years for XRP to reach a new peak against the dollar. With Bitcoin, we haven't yet. So consider this. When this occurred in 2017, how much was Bitcoin worth? XRP was still in circulation at one point, and Bitcoin reached a peak of about $20,000 towards the end of the year, as you may know. I can't recall the precise amount, but you are aware of how high XRP reached during the 2017 bull run, reaching $3.35 in the end. Therefore, it may have been near that when it reached its highest point ever. In any case, it would have been in the vicinity. That was already the case, so consider that. When XRP was essentially at its highest point ever against the dollar, you can see this all-time high on the XRP BTC exchange.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Right now, it's completely against Bitcoin. In contrast to Bitcoin, XRP began to disintegrate following the election. It's accurate. That is visually apparent. It has somewhat increased. It's not down at all, mind you. However, the last time that happened, it was at its highest point ever, both about Bitcoin and the dollar. We're not at the moment. While XRP is very near its all-time high, we are not at an all-time high for Bitcoin. This is not finished. I don't know about you guys, but I don't believe it would be strange if XRP did indeed reach a new all-time high against Bitcoin this cycle. I'm not sure if it will occur. Although I don't personally forecast prices, I'm attempting to explain why this wouldn't be nutso. It would be entirely logical to assume that this may occur at any moment. You understand what that means then? The previous time XRP reached a new all-time high, Bitcoin was significantly less valuable, which is why this would be a huge deal. Bitcoin is now worth a lot more than it was at its peak in 2017, when it was around $20,000. And even with the decline, it is still worth $113,000 or $114,000 today. Do you know what the price would be if XRP equals that on the BTC pair? If it simply returns to that all-time high? I did some math before making this video because it's worth so much more now than it was then. Given the current price of Bitcoin, XRP would be worth $25.53 if it were to simply reach that all-time high against the cryptocurrency. In terms of what it means for the dollar, it's obviously a moving goal, since if Bitcoin declines and XRP reaches its all-time high, the price of XRP will surely drop in USD. However, you can see why none of this is ridiculous. More than $25 XRP, even only to return to that zone? Hey people, this isn't fantasy. It is utterly absurd and irrational to believe that XRP will never again reach a new all-time high above Bitcoin. Never? Ever, ever, ever? Never? Not even for a few seconds? Come on then. That doesn't make sense to me. People used to say that against the XRP-USD combination as well, and I found that to be as absurd. And we were validated. We were all right to predict that XRP would reach a new all-time high against the dollar. It's crazy, then. However, I do want you to realize how young you are. You're not early per se. He wrote in another article by chart analyst Credible Crypto, adding that the largest changes of any cycle occur in the latter 10% of it, rather than the first 90%. Yes, you are not early, but the most significant and daring movements are still to come. Now, people, that is simply the truth. Exactly right. So think about this. During 2017, Bitcoin was booming. Where did it begin? Was it about $1,000? Look it up if you want the actual number. It was most likely somewhere in the neighborhood.
No, it wasn't 2000 yet, but I don't think it was either. I believe it was almost 1,000 at the beginning of 2017. For this, however, approximate figures are useful. We are aware that it increased from roughly $1,000 to roughly $20,000 in just a year, correct? However, did you realize that Bitcoin's 2017 price increase from 1,000 to 10,000 took roughly 11 months? A tenfold rise then. I'm quite certain, and this is about right, I'm just relying on my recollection, but it would have been around Thanksgiving, so perhaps late November, when Bitcoin crossed 10,000 for the first time ever, which at the time was really significant. Big news. $10,000 for a single Bitcoin, that's wild talk. Whoa. All right, but it went from 10,000 to 20,000 in about 3 or 4 weeks. During that time, it doubled. That implies that over the final 4 weeks of the year, you went from having a 10x to having a 20x by simply adding a little extra time. At the tail end of a bull market, things may happen that fast. What we're waiting for is that. Even if you are completely new to cryptocurrency, I will tell you this. You have a lot to learn. And you have entered the market at a very crazy time. But if history repeats itself, as it usually does, you can make some insane returns before the market peaks. However, if history repeats itself, a bubble will form and burst. Naturally, you need to exercise caution. But before this thing finally goes south, there may be a lot more fun on the upside. Thus, that is what we must anticipate. That's what we have to do. And now, I hope you understood what I said about the XRP BTC pair. My God. If that doesn't excite you or make sense to you, then I either need to learn how to explain that better, or I don't know what the issue is, because it's abundantly clear that the idea of XRP reaching these levels is simply not crazy. Those enormous ramps are hardly seen these days. I'll bring up the chart once more here, and it's shared by chart analyst Galaxy. You can see how swiftly it occurred and how brief it was. Even though these candles are just for a month, it should still tell you something. Yes, it does occur, but it does so rapidly and infrequently. In contrast to Bitcoin, XRP has been accumulating for 5 years, as stated by Galaxy. Though not for this long, we have been here before. When this occurs, what happens? Yes, he is aware of the solution. When something eventually does break, the force is stronger the longer it consolidates. So excited who when this nasty dude leaves? Additionally, if Bitcoin returns to its all-time high on the XRP BTC pair, your price of XRP will likewise increase as it rises. But take a look at how long this consolidation has been going on. It was 2,070 days when you posted this yesterday, based on this computation.
It's the longest accumulation in history, yet the XRP USD would break out as I predicted. This is going to happen too, I promise you. Additionally, the move that we witnessed in November is cool. Gaining a small amount of ground recently is cool. Furthermore, Credible Crypto believes that we will, or at least have the potential to, gain considerably more ground shortly. However, that is insignificant in comparison to what will occur when this machine is really operating at full capacity. Talk about the season of face melting. It's only a question of time till we see fireworks like that again, in my opinion.